What is up, everyone? My name is Joseph and welcome back to another casually competitive MTG video. In this video, we're going to do something a little bit different from just gameplay, and I'm going to actually answer a question that we get quite a bit. This question is worded in a various number of ways, but really boils down to two big questions. The first one being, what is cEDH? And secondly, why do we consider ourselves semi-competitive rather than competitive? So I wanted to take a few minutes today to just kind of give our point of view on this specific topic and kind of clarify some things. First things first, I think the easiest thing to answer would be the question, what is cEDH, as we need to build on this answer later on. As a quick preface or disclaimer, we understand that rating power levels of decks is incredibly subjective, and we're not here to kind of force our way of rating decks onto you. What I want to do today is just give our point of view on how we internally organize and rate our own decks. Now, I will be using kind of a very basic number scale of 1 to 10 in terms of power, and that's not something we really think is accurate. I don't suggest rating your power level of your deck on a strict number scale. There's so many different factors, but that's a much longer conversation for a different video. Just remember, for the sake of simplicity, we are for today going to use some simple numbers, but that's probably not the best and the only way to kind of rate a deck's power level. That all being said, let's get into answering this question. To simply put, we kind of use the following definition as like a baseline for competitive decks, for competitive EDH. And this definition would be decks that are built around the strongest commanders using the strongest cards built in the most optimal way. Basically, cEDH is the best of the best. Now, this may seem kind of like a cop-out explanation, like, oh yeah, cEDH is the best of the best, obviously, but I wanted to word it that way specifically. We really consider cEDH in truly competitive decks to be the very best. If you're going to play a specific archetype, you're going to use the best commander and the best cards, meaning that your deck list will be budgetless and there'll be no cards in there that aren't in there for a very specific reason, a very tuned list and a very specific empowered list. And that's really what we consider to be competitive EDH and truly cEDH. Now, like I said before, I don't support strictly rating deck power levels by numbers, but if we were going to put this on a 1 to 10 scale, the cEDH decks would be either a 9 or a 10. So very high level, the only variation being maybe a specific archetype is weaker, but can still keep up with and beat the 10. So I would say a 9 or a 10 are probably the true competitive EDH decks. Now, in terms of what those decks are, I'm actually going to refer you to a website, cEDH Decklist Database, and you can kind of just take a look through there to see what are some well-vetted, well-tested decks that are considered competitive. The decks I would really focus on as being truly competitive are the ones that are marked as recommended, or the ones with the little Phyrexian symbol. These are decks that are built around the strongest archetype, that run the best interaction, the most tutors, and the right combos and the right amount of combos to compete with each other in a very fast-paced format. I would say these decks win very consistently by turn 3 or 4 at the very latest, or at least if they're not winning that fast, it's because of other very strong decks holding them back. But in general, very fast and very interactive. So that's what cEDH is. So what are we? Why do we consider ourselves semi-competitive? When comparing what we are going for with our deck lists and competitive, truly competitive EDH decks, there's really two big points that I want to hit on that I think are points of difference between the two. The first one being budget, and the second one being commander choice. So now I want to kind of break down these two buckets and give some examples and some supportive reasoning on why we think that these 2 points kind of separate semi-competitive and truly competitive. So first, let's talk about budget. In the first example I have for this, I want to talk about a very specific land, Gaea's Cradle. Now, this land hovers between $300 and $350, and it's a very expensive but incredibly powerful card. Now, this card isn't necessarily a win condition more times than not. However, it is an incredibly strong piece of land-based ramp that has a high price tag. So how can adding this one card really drastically change the power level of a deck? Now, pretty clearly, having Gaea's Cradle is going to give you a big bump in ramp and big mana. However, it is just one card out of 100, so what's the likelihood that you actually pull it, and how much will that really affect the games you play? To answer this, let's look at just some quick math on how likely it is to get this card in any given game. So for this thought experiment, let's look at turn 3. Let's say the game is making it to turn 3. No card draw, just natural draw for turn, and you kept a hand of 7 cards. So using these numbers, you'll be looking at 10 cards overall out of 100. Now the chance to get 1 out of 100 cards within 10 draws is around 10%, really not that high of a chance to get Gaia's Cradle. However, if you look at supporting cards, cards that can easily grab Gaia's Cradle or tutor for them, like a Crop Rotation or a Sylvan Scrying, you now have essentially 3 copies of Gaia's Cradle, and so you really only need to pull one of those 3 in order to get Gaia's Cradle onto the battlefield. Now, I understand there are situations and variables that go into whether or not you would want to tutor up Gaia's Cradle, but for the sake of this, you do have 3 cards that give you the opportunity to get Gaia's Cradle. So pulling 3 out of 100 within 10 draws brings your percentage of getting this card up to over 25%. I think the exact number would be 27.3, which is basically a quarter of all of your games. That's 1 out of every 4 games could have the possibility of having a Gaia's Cradle in it, which is huge. Having Gaia's Cradle really doesn't win you the game, but it really ramps you forward and propels you to get to the point you need to be in order to win, especially if you're running a very creature-heavy deck. It's not going to win you the game, but it will get you pretty damn close. And if you look at the opposite of that, if you decide to budget this card, even, I know it's pretty drastic, but let's just say it's a forest instead, you'll have a 0% chance of getting this insane ramp, really honestly bringing the power level down of the deck just within that 1 card. I don't want to say that just one budgetless card is really going to take the deck power level from competitive to semi-competitive, but if you start cutting out these higher budget cards like a Time Twister, a Gaia's Cradle, really bringing the power level down from competitive to something like a semi-competitive, which is what we would consider one step behind. So cards like Gaia's Cradle and Time Twister and Imperial Seal, all of these cards do work to make the deck more consistent, more reliable, and faster, and by not including these cards and cards that are similar in cost and value, we really aim to keep our decks at a semi-competitive level, which, for sake of a really simplistic comparison, would be between maybe a 7 and a 9 power level. So rather than playing the 9s and 10s of competitive, we're playing the 7s to 8.9s of what we consider semi-competitive. And so now I want to talk about how the commander choice can kind of affect that power level difference or consistency of a deck. The biggest reason is some commanders are just straight up better for a given archetype. If you are trying to play as competitive as possible, you want to give yourself as many competitive edges as you can, and a commander choice is a big way to do this. Now, I don't want to say there's no variation in cEDH or competitive EDH games, but there is much less, as you want to stick to the strongest choices. And I will use a very specific example for this, and it is for the Flash Hulk archetype, which is very strong, but let's look at 2 different commander choices. There's a Tymna Thrasios choice, and then cEDH Brood Tyrant. Now these both can be very strong decks, and they are both listed in the cEDH database, but you will notice that one has the Phyrexian symbol and one does not. And a big reason for this is color choice. You're missing an entire color using cEDH. While the same general game plan is kind of the same, it's a Flash Hulk pile, you're missing quite a bit by just sacrificing the white color. Now, you're not going to have a lot of white cards in the Tymna Thrasios combo, but you're missing out on a Silence, an Enlightened Tutor, something like an Aven Mind-Sensor could be very strong. And a lot of the Hulk piles for Tymna Thrasios involve several white creatures, and you just straight up don't have those options with cEDH. Another reason is the commanders, the partner commanders, just have better effects than cEDH does. With Tymna, you can get early, consistent card draw using your mana dorks. With Thrasios, you have a mana dump if you do need to get value, and you also have a way to dump infinite mana and draw your library. Now compare that to cEDH. You really don't have a lot of value options from your command zone. You're in very good colors, you're in 3 colors, but your command zone doesn't have any easy value options compared to Tymna Thrasios. Now there's other much more in-depth reasons on why the Tymna Thrasios combination is better than a cEDH, but those are just some quick examples on how those 2 decks are a little bit different, but the power level between them can be fairly drastic. A Tymna Thrasios deck is going to win much more consistently than a cEDH Flash Hulk deck in a truly competitive pod. So to wrap up all these points and to really answer the question, why do we consider ourselves semi-competitive? It is because we use more budget options for cards. Yes, we do have a Mana Crypt, but we're not adding Mox Diamond in a lot of decks. We're not adding Gaia's Cradle. We're not adding Time Twister. We're doing that specifically because we want to keep the decks to a semi-competitive level so we can justify playing the commanders that we do want to play, even if they are a little little less powerful. We do enjoy very strong and very competitive Magic to watch and to play. However, on camera, we did want to show that you can still play fast, interactive, and entertaining decks with some more varied commanders and with some more varied card choices. So that is the biggest reason why we consider ourselves semi-competitive, and really why we chose to play semi-competitive rather than play competitive for gameplay videos. I do want to clarify that we have nothing against these stronger competitive decks. I personally really enjoy watching some cEDH are playing with Power on YouTube and the Mystic Remoras on Twitch. They tend to focus more primarily on just the competitive lists. And we also don't dislike the casual community. We do enjoy the casual style of gameplay, and a lot of times off camera, we'll play our own casual decks. But what we wanted to focus on with this channel specifically is kind of that bridge in between, that semi-competitive area where we can play fast-paced combo decks, but we're a little bit more free with card choice and commanders. Even though it was a little brief, I hope that did kind of give you a good explanation on why we are doing what we're doing. I know maybe you personally haven't had that question, but we have had to ask quite a bit, and I did want to make kind of a video just explaining the whole concept and just to give an answer for everyone who's wondering. That is all we have for this video. If you did enjoy it and you do want more of these kind of style of videos where it's just kind of me talking to you rather than gameplay, let us know in the comments below. If we do end up doing more of these, they won't take away from the gameplay, they would be in addition to, but we are curious on if you'd like to see more of conceptual style videos like this. That being said, that is all we have for this video. Like I said before, hope you did enjoy it. I am Joseph, this is Casually Competitive MTG, and we will see you next time.